Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Anarchy Arena Podcast, episode 27. This is going to end up being another serious and somber episode as we take this time to once again deal with the current climate of our country and the issues with policing here in the United States. We thought that the best way for us to have this conversation would be to actually talk to somebody who used to be a cop as part of their daily lives. And so to that end, tonight on the show, you will hear from my dad, who is a retired police officer. We're going to talk about a multitude of things. For the first time ever, I have actually written up notes and talking points of things that we need to have conversations about during this episode. Now, I'm recording this intro before we ever have the conversation. Normally, I record these after the fact and put in little snippets. Not this time. This time, I'm recording it before the fact. I'm recording this on June 20th, so the day after Juneteenth, the day before Father's Day. And little does my father know, but before we record the show tonight, both John and I will be attending a protest here in our small Tennessee town. So, if the current political climate is not something you want to hear about right now, if you're a little tired of it, we get it. You don't want to listen to this one, that's fine. We understand. However, I highly encourage it. We obviously haven't had the conversation yet, but I can tell you right now, it's going to be one that you're going to want to listen to. So with that, enough of me rambling. Let's get on to the show. Anarchy Arena Podcast, episode 27, with my dad. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Anarchy Arena Podcast, episode 27, and we have another guest on the show today, a very special guest. Well, special to me. I don't know how special he's going to be to all of you. Maybe he will be by the end of this episode. Who knows? But
he's special to me. I love Ronnie.
He's special to John, too, considering the climate that everything's been in. And as you heard from the intro, we're recording this the day after Juneteenth and the day before Father's Day. Which is ironic considering our guest tonight, because our guest tonight is a retired member of law enforcement who also happens to be my father, Dad, Ronnie Barrett. So, Dad, if you'd like to introduce yourself to the masses and give a little bit of your background in law enforcement.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you guys for inviting me to be here.
Of course.
Of course.
Okay, I have approximately 30 years of law enforcement experience. I started out my law enforcement career working for the Provost Marshal's office at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, where I was for about a year and a half to 2 years as a federal law enforcement officer. I then went to the Federal Aviation Administration, where I was a police officer. It then switched over to what is now called MWA, or the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, in June of 1987. I was with the Airports Authority for 28 and a half years. During that time, I was a patrol officer. I was a firearms instructor for 26 of those 28 and a half years. I then became my department's lead firearms instructor and range master out at our police range at Dulles Airport, where I was there for 13 years. During that time, I was promoted to sergeant. I was then sent back to patrol, where I was a patrol supervisor and field training supervisor at both Reagan National and at Dulles Airport for the last 6.5, 7 years or so of my career. Now retired in 2015 from Dulles Airport. So that's kind of who I am and where I've been.
So, needless to say, almost 30 years with various forms of law, or over 30 years with various forms of law enforcement.
Right around 30, yeah.
So you've experienced law enforcement at a lot of levels too, right?
Yeah, I did because part of my job as a training officer, especially working at the range, was that I did a lot of training not only for my agency but for other agencies in both firearms and in defensive tactics.
Right.
So if you were to look back on your career, Dad, how would you overall view your career? Not talking about the current climate or anything, just you personally, how would you look back on your career?
Challenging, definitely. Interesting.
How so?
Challenging in that every time you do something, it's different. Even every traffic stop is different.
Right.
Every interaction, even if it's with the same basic call, is different because everybody you're interacting with is different. So that made it challenging and interesting at the same time. I was fortunate in that I got to work with a lot of other agencies and got to work a lot with some of their SWAT teams and a lot with instructors from the police academy to help them with their training. Right. Myself and one of the other instructors that I worked with from another agency, actually, we ended up being the two instructors that taught the vast majority of firearms instructors for the agencies in Northern Virginia, at least the ones that went to the Northern Virginia Criminal Justice Training Academy. We became the firearms instructors teaching firearms instructors how to do their job. So it gave me a chance to interact with a lot of different law enforcement officers and a lot of different people, both in patrol and in my training capacity. In addition to that, I was also part of what we call our peer support team or critical incident stress management team. Being with them, I got to interact with a lot of other critical incident stress management peers from all over the state. So I had a really interesting career.
It seems
fun.
like. I've known Chris for 12 years. I've never known like half the stuff you've done. So this is gonna be interesting for me, if no one else, you know.
Yeah, to say you had an interesting career is definitely, I think, downplaying a little bit of it. Because when I tell people, oh yeah, my dad's a retired cop, that that's pretty much the long and the short of it. I don't go into the full details of everything. But when you get into the full details of everything, you've done a lot. You weren't just a gun teacher.
No, I helped my department develop their active shooter program. Myself and several of my other instructors basically came up with the first active shooter program for our agency. And we taught that active shooter program to all of our sworn personnel. And when I had people for in-service training out at the range, every time, that was one of the things we worked on, being able to work together as teams in the event we ever had a workplace violence situation like that.
Right. Well, I want to ask you, and we've sort of talked about this before the show, but I want to ask you, how did you saw the George Floyd clip, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So initial reactions, is that what you're going for, John?
Yeah, a little bit. Initial reactions. As someone who spent over almost 3 decades in the force, how did you see that going down? Did you see that as, excessive force, or did you see like misunderstanding or something like that? Like, how did you personally see it?
The guy committed murder.
Okay.
No
all right.
ifs, ands, or buts. What he did was not only illegal, but immoral. Take my word for it, guys. There is no group of people more pissed off at those cops than other cops, especially other good cops.
Right.
You
8 minutes and 46 seconds. I want people to think about that amount of time that the officer was kneeling on George Floyd's neck.
Yeah, we had an opportunity to experience that length of time. Today there was a protest in our little small Tennessee town that both John and I attended, and other than a few minor shouting matches and the occasional shove from some white supremacist, fascist, bigoted assholes that decided to show up, it went relatively smoothly. And part of that was the organizer at one point asked us all to kneel, and I'm thinking, okay, moment of silence, cool, good idea. And then when he looked at his phone and said, "Hey guys, we're at the 2-minute mark," that's when I realized what he was doing. He was having all of us kneel for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And I don't know about you, dude. I was hurting just kneeling on concrete for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I can't imagine doing that while committing murder. Like how you just stay there.
Well, see, hate is a good fucking motivator. Unfortunately, and I feel like the officer that murdered George Floyd, and yes, I'm saying murdered, had a lot of that in him. And there's a lot of people on my side of politics that like to say that all cops are bastards. I completely disagree with that. I find that to be just as hateful as the language that the other side uses. But what I do believe in is that the system kind of causes these things to happen. Would you agree with that, Ronnie? Do you think that the system that's behind, like the unions and whatnot, that's behind these cops, kind of causes that aggressiveness and that lack of empathy?
No, I don't think that the unions cause that to happen. What I think happens is that, excuse me, one of the bad things that the unions do is that they, because of their mandate, they're required to represent people who do stupid things. Yeah. And just like a lawyer, they're required to represent them to the best of their ability. And so what ends up happening is the same thing that happens in other cases with lawyers, where you end up, people get away with doing things.
Yeah.
And just like a kid, if you get away with doing something bad, then you think you can do it whenever you want. And if you get away with several things, then you think you can pretty much do anything you want.
Right.
And so at one point, I was a union representative when I was a patrol officer. And I resigned from doing that after my third time of having to represent the same person for doing the same stupid thing. And it wasn't anywhere near as egregious as this. Just being basically an idiot. And I had to resign because what I wanted to do when we walked into the chief's office is look at the chief and go, he's a moron hammering. But I'm his representative. I can't do that. So I'm like, you know what? It's time for me not to be doing this anymore and I told the guy point blank, I said, you're an idiot. You deserve time unpaid at home. And if it doesn't happen to you, you're lucky. Because if I was the chief, I can tell you right now, I would be trying to fire your ass, not give you unpaid leave. You would be fired if I could help it.
Right. You brought up a really good point about how it's not the system, it's that they constantly get away with it. With qualified immunity, I think I said that right. Qualified immunity, which is kind of written into a lot of those police union laws, a lot of police laws, where basically you can be immune so long as you think that you're afraid for your life.
Well, a little bit of
if it was in the course of doing your job, then you are quote unquote excused of certain things.
Okay. If you are doing your job the way you're supposed to, then qualified immunity can attach. If, on the other hand, you are not doing it properly, then qualified immunity, the court can determine whether or not qualified immunity attaches or not. It's not an automatic. Okay, so
But
would,
a lot of people
would you say,
are confused about how qualified immunity attaches. Okay.
So would you say that possibly the definition or the interpretation that some court systems are using for qualified immunity has been stretched way too far?
I can't speak to a lot of different court systems. I can speak to the ones that I dealt with. And in the ones that I dealt with, no, that didn't happen. Now, from looking at things from the outside of different agencies and different jurisdictions, is it possible that the court has, in some cases at least, broadened what that qualified immunity should be? Yes. Okay.
Right.
There is a big difference between there being differences of opinion about how somebody should do their job as to whether or not it's right or wrong. And just because I may think an officer didn't handle a situation the way I would have, doesn't mean that they handled it improperly.
Right, but it also doesn't mean they didn't handle it improperly.
That's true. That's true. It doesn't. And
because there's a lot of cops that will use qualified immunity, saying I was afraid. I was afraid for my life. I was trying to protect myself.
Well, see,
so I reached for my gun.
That in and of itself, qualified immunity doesn't necessarily attach there. Okay.
Right.
You have to be able to say, for the use of deadly force, you have to be able to say that you honestly believed that either your life or the life of others or serious bodily injury to you or others was a reasonable outcome if you did not use the level of force you used.
Right.
And that all stems from, believe it or not, a 1984 case. The incident was in 1984. It was heard by the Supreme Court in 1989. And the case is called Graham v. Connor.
Yep.
And in Graham v. Connor... I'm sorry?
I said I know what you're talking about.
Okay. In Graham v. Connor, what the court said is, number one, you can't view the officer's actions based on 20/20 hindsight. You can only view the officer's actions with the information they had at the time that they made the decision. And it needs to be brought to, or needs to be brought up to what would be a reasonably well-trained and prudent officer under those same circumstances, whether or not they believe that officer's actions were reasonable. Again, not necessarily what they would do, but could they be deemed reasonable? Okay. And that's basically what Graham Connor said.
Yeah.
Now, the incident around Graham Connor sounds terrible, what happened. But I understand why the Supreme Court said what they said. It made sense, because prior to that, for a defendant to prove that there was unreasonable force, it wasn't viewed under the Fourth Amendment search and seizure. It was viewed under the Sixth Amendment, unusual and cruel punishment, and you had to show that the officer had malice in doing what he did. That's a really hard thing to prove.
Yes.
Then,
okay.
Now we have body cams. And we have ways to report
in theory.
cops.
Even with body cams. See, the problem with body cams is, depending upon the body cam shows you the point of view from where the camera is. It doesn't necessarily show you everything the officer sees. You're seeing a straightforward look, but the officer could turn his head and look to the right and see something completely different. And you never see that.
Well, they could attach a camera onto on a hatch or something like that. I mean, most cops are wearing caps anyways. You could do that and set that up. The reason why I brought that up is because I feel like sometimes cops use that as an excuse to use excessive force. They use the, you have to prove that we did it, and we have we're going to have our people review it to say whether or not I use excessive force as part of the problem. I'm just, this is just coming from a sort of an outsider's perspective, but sometimes I see cops that they don't try to de-escalate problems. They only escalate them by their actions. Which is not what a police officer should be doing. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, unfortunately, and this has gotten better. It's not where it needs to be. Unfortunately, a lot of academies don't spend as much time teaching de-escalation as they teach escalation.
Now, why is that?
Part of it is because de-escalation is really tough to teach, only because every situation is so different. You can't teach de-escalation for every possible thing that could happen. And the other thing that comes into that is that time constraints. And when I say time constraints, we are expected to take care of the problem now. And sometimes the best solution is not now. Sometimes the best solution is get some type of barrier between me and the subject, and let's try and bring everything down a little bit. But there have been officers that have been sued over the fact that this person then did something to somebody else and they didn't stop them first. Well, why did you stay behind your car instead of coming out and taking care of that problem? Well, I was trying to de-escalate the problem. So you end up being in a catch-22.
Yeah.
And we spend a lot of time teaching people, go to the gunfire, stop the problem. We don't spend as much time teaching them, go to the gunfire, assess the problem, then figure out the best way to stop it.
So, judging from your tone in that statement, you kind of agree that the police have not been trained to think. They've only been trained to react. Is that what you're trying to say?
It's not that they haven't been trained to think. Under stress, thinking becomes very, very difficult. Okay?
Yeah. That's kind of what I meant. I didn't mean like not think at all. I meant like under stress thinking.
Yeah. Under stress, you have a tendency to revert back to what your training has been.
Right.
And if your training has not been to step back, look, assess, evaluate, come up with a secondary game plan. Don't necessarily rush in hands-on immediately, because that may not be the best option.
Yeah, like
it may be. It may be the best option. It depends.
Right. Like for instance, a lot of times when cops are extremely aggressive, it's because of a person with a mental disability not responding, and they, like someone with autism, someone that has maybe schizophrenia or some type of mental disease that's affecting them, and their judgment skills are not up to snuff. And I've seen videos, I've seen reports of cops where somebody's not responding and they take them down, only to find out oh, this person is autistic and they're nonverbal. And I feel like cops get asked to do way too much.
And you and I have had that conversation in recent days, Dad. And
Yes.
it's all the different hats that you're asked to wear are ridiculous.
Yes.
Right.
They are.
Because not only do you have to play a law enforcement officer, you also have to play medic. You also have to play psychiatrist or therapist. You also have to play kind of like family therapist. When you go to a call that's like a family fighting, you're not supposed to go in and just start busting heads. You're supposed to go there to stop the fight. And a lot of the problem I see a lot is that cops aren't receiving the right amount of training. They're not being trained that way. And it hurts me because it's like, if we give you this much money, 300 fucking million I think is what we gave them in Atlanta. Our small town gave them 35 million. And
while not giving anything to any of the social programs or the Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah, Boys and Girls Club got $0. The mental health institutes around here got $0. Public defenders got $0.
But MPD got $35 billion.
Yeah. Which,
believe it or not, guys, $35 million is not a lot of money.
Well, it's a lot more than zero.
It is. It is. and I agree with you that the other groups that you talk about should have been receiving funding also. Absolutely. Yeah. To not fund them is basically what you're saying is we're not going to fund you. We're going to expect the cops to be able to handle everything.
Right. We don't need to fund the mental health. We're just going to ask the cops to do it for you. So you don't need the money. It's okay.
Right. And then when we don't handle it the way people think we should, then they get PO'd because, well, you didn't handle that right. Well, okay, I'm not a counselor. I'm not a therapist.
Right.
And I took a lot of training when it came to, in our critical incident stress management team, acting as a peer support, not officially therapist, but learning how to listen to people.
Right.
And figure out what's going on with them. But that's because I volunteered to do that. And I spent a lot of my own time.
That's not something that was mandatory.
No.
So wait, that's not mandatory?
No, that was something Dad volunteered to be a part of, was the peer support team, which
is that not
was very
mandatory?
proud that he wanted to do
that.
Shouldn't it be though? Shouldn't that kind of training be mandatory? Or at the very least, maybe not mandatory. Maybe you guys shouldn't have to do that kind of training because other departments have the funding they need, so you guys aren't called to put on that hat.
I don't know. I to some extent, I agree with what you're saying. The problem is, in my entire career, I knew 2 mental health professionals that would actually go out with cops and ride with them and see what the cops saw. Most mental health professionals, they didn't go to school to do that. They don't have a master's or a doctorate to go out and deal with idiot child who decided to get obliterated on whatever substance and came home and started beating the wife and kids.
Right.
They don't want to be there for that. They don't want to be there for the guy that is coked out of his mind that we're trying to help. They're more than happy to talk to him about why he got into that addiction once you have him in a facility. But they don't want to be out there doing it.
And I agree with you on that. But I also think that, you said you've been in the force, you were in the force for almost 30 years and you only met 2. That's pretty indicative of the situation at hand. at least in my opinion.
Well,
that we have a lack of mental health funding and training and emphasis on it in this country? Yes.
Yeah.
We do.
It's blatantly obvious, especially now. We're starting to finally feel the reverberations of that. I mean, look at our homeless vets. A lot of them were in mental health hospitals because of PTSD and because of other trauma and whatnot, and they got booted out because those facilities shut down because of no funding. And we treat those people that the person that's the crackhead who's he's freaking out, he's bugged out because he got a bad fucking batch, and the homeless vet who may be dealing with other mental issues that can't cooperate. We're treating them as criminals when we should be treating them as sick people, as patients. And I was going to say, what I was going to say there was, this country has a problem that's not just cops. And that's the reason why I don't say all cops are bastards. The problem is that we have a justice system that is designed to make money and not to dispense justice. The more, like these for-profit prisons, the more people they have in them, the more money they get. And what better way to do that than start charging people for being mentally ill and being an addict?
We actually have a case of that here in Tennessee. I was just doing the research the other day. Apparently, one of the members of the Tennessee House is also a sitting CEO for the board of the local for-profit prison system that runs all of Tennessee's jails. And he put forth a bill to make it easier to arrest people so his jails could get more filled so he could get more monies.
Right.
Yeah, that's one huge, in my opinion, mistakes that we made was, as a society, is this whole for-profit incarceration system. Okay.
Yeah.
And I understand the background of why they did it, because the jurisdictions didn't have enough money to be able to have a facility for incarcerating them or keeping people themselves.
Right.
Especially when you started to get mandatory minimums for things and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so
which was decidedly racist.
So somebody figured out, hey, here's a place I can make money. Here's a niche. And then politics being what it is, they use their influence with politicians and their money with politicians to continually ramp that up.
Some of those politicians happen to be fascist presidents, just saying.
Well,
when you take 13 out of the 14 boxes, I think we can officially call you what you are.
Yep.
Unfortunately, I would love to say it was just this president, and it's not. Okay?
This
has been going on for decades. Okay?
Yeah, since Reagan and Bush, that it's like the first Bush, not Bush W. They've been monopolizing crime.
Actually, it even started before Reagan.
Oh, really?
Depending upon what the crime was, even with Carter, you had some of that. Okay, so everybody has their own peccadillos, if you were, about things that people need to be locked up for.
Right.
And society, for good or evil, doesn't. They don't want to see the problem. They don't want to see the soldier who did 3 tours and comes back with PTSD, and when somebody sets off their fireworks on the 4th of July, loses his mind.
Right.
The public doesn't want to see that. So, okay, he did something bad when those fireworks went off. Let's lock him up. And unfortunately, society pushed that way, and it snowballed. And now it's for a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Which really, and most of the deputies that I've known that worked in the jails will tell you that, I can't get the person that's here the help that they need because they really don't need to be here. This is not where they need to be.
Right.
Yeah.
They need to be someplace else, but I can't do that,
And it's a fucking shame that a lot of good people kind of get wrapped up in this fucking cycle that we have, the cycle of constant incarceration, unbalanced incarceration, people of color being locked up for for less violent crimes for longer than some rich, affluent, white people. I say this as a poor white guy. I grew up poor white trash. I lived back in the holler. Most of my family had single wides. I was well off to do. I had a double wide. And when cops showed up, it was never a good time. It was never, hey, cops showed up and things got solved. It was usually cops showed up and now I gotta go get my uncle out of jail because, we need to get bail money real quick to get him out of jail because they found, an ounce of weed in his house or something like that.
And John and I have talked about this before, and I've mentioned this to you, Dad. This is the disconnect him and I were having for a while, where that's his experience with law enforcement. Whereas on the whole, my experience obviously has been mostly positive. I never had that kind of issues with law enforcement. And I don't know if that's a geographical thing or what, or it has to do with who you are and the fact that you're my father. I don't know if that has something to do with it or if it has to do with geography, or what. But that was a disconnect we were having. Is every time he saw the cops, it was bad news. Every time I saw the cops, it was like, hey, cool, some of Dad's friends, or hey, I might know that guy.
Well, think about who it was that I would introduce you to.
That's true. You did make a point of telling me that guy. Yeah, not so much. We don't hang out with him.
Right. Yeah. I didn't have you meet idiots. Okay. I didn't hang out with people that were on the department that I thought were idiots. Okay. So the experiences you had were with cops that cared. Cops who thought that their number one job was to protect and serve.
Right.
Okay.
Mark Anderson, if you're listening, I'm tipping my hat to you, sir.
By the way, he retired recently.
Oh, good for him.
So he's living down in Charlotte full time now.
Good.
Yeah. Mark Anderson, Debbie Myers, Ben's handler.
Yep.
Okay. Wayne True.
Eric Sembrook.
Yeah, Eric Sembrook. Okay. Because I didn't hang out with knuckleheads. I certainly wasn't going to introduce you to knuckleheads if we happened to be at the airport. And like you said, there were times when I'd be like, no, we don't talk to him because he's a knucklehead. Okay. He does stupid shit and I don't associate myself with him. Now,
right.
If something bad's happening to him, am I going to back him up? Absolutely. Okay. Doesn't matter whether I like him, whether I think he's an idiot, whether I think he's a knucklehead. I'm going to back him up. Now, I may chew him out afterwards for putting me in that situation. I may even, like I told you guys before when we had one conversation, where I told a guy that if I ever saw him do something that he did again, he wouldn't have to worry about the citizen filing a complaint. I would file a complaint on him, and I was going to kick his ass.
Right. That's also kind of sort of my problem, which is I understand out in the field of you guys got to stick together. That's your partner. That's the person you're rolling with. I understand that, but cops need to start policing themselves.
Absolutely.
In the field.
Okay.
In the field, not just at the station in the
Yes.
field. If you see a cop, and you're also a cop, if you see a cop using excessive force, your option isn't to make sure he's okay. You need to get that cop, toss his ass over, and tell him, like, hell, I would be happy if you put him in fucking cuffs and just go, look, you went way above the call of duty here, and you became the aggressor in the situation.
Sit down, breathe, shut up, back off for a minute.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So that brings me to the point I was going to say about officers 2, 3, and 4. Yes, we're not using any of their names because they don't deserve that kind of attention. Officers 2, 3, and 4 in the George Floyd incident who stood there with their hands in their pockets.
Officers 2, 3, and 4 should be charged as accessories.
And I believe they have been as of now.
Yeah.
And they should be having murder charges against them, which I believe you're correct. They have also been charged with murders or accessory to murder because they were.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they were.
They should have pulled him off. I don't care.
Right.
I don't care what happened before. I don't care how bad this guy was fighting you. I don't care if he busted your lip. I don't care if he broke your freaking arm. Once he is secured, you are required to care for his safety.
Right.
And they didn't.
No, they did not.
Every one of them, as far as I'm concerned, can spend a very long time wearing an orange jumpsuit and having many friends that they probably don't want to have. And we'll leave that where that is.
Right.
Okay. Dad, you've listened to this show before. You can say what you want. Ladies and gentlemen, what he wants to say is he hope those guys go to prison, get bent over by some guy who's 6'3" with a 12-inch, 6-foot wide dick, and have it shoved up their ass repeatedly, preferably with some venereal diseases attached to it. That sound about right?
That'll never happen. Unfortunately, they'll all be in what's called PC, or protective custody.
They'll be in protective custody. Yeah, they won't be released to Gen Pop because if they were in Gen Pop, let's face it, they'd probably be dead inside of 36 hours.
Yeah, probably.
I would even. Yeah, I was about to say I wouldn't even say 36. I'd say
I was being
12.
generous with 36 hours.
Right.
Yeah, 12 hours is max for me.
Yeah, no, those guys, and I understand the effects of adrenaline. I understand where your brain goes when you're under stress. I get it. I've been there. Okay.
Right.
That's why the other cops on the scene are so important. Because can you get out of hand? Abso-freaking-lutely you can. And not because you meant to. Just because you were so full of adrenaline, so pumped and scared. That's what the other cops are there for.
Right.
To make sure you don't do anything stupid.
Right. And it sounds like you
make sure you stay safe.
Right. It sounds like you've been on both sides of that coin too, where you've been fired up, and also where you've been the one that has to pull somebody off and go, just chill the fuck out.
I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about that happened to me.
Okay.
We got a call one day for 2 men with a gun at a place called Gravelly Point, which is just north of Reagan National Airport. It's a big park. George Washington bike path runs through there, all 9 yards.
Yeah. Yeah, people like to go sit up there and watch the planes.
Yeah. We got a call from Park Police, mutual aid, because they did not have a unit anywhere nearby. It's their primary jurisdiction. Myself and another one of my officers, we were both officers at the time, responded. We got into the park. He was ahead of me. As he pulled up, I saw an individual run up to his cruiser and start pointing down across the open field. And he started driving down across the open field. So I'm like, okay, whoever that was must have been the person who reported it, and the guys with the guns must be down that way. So I'm going to loop around to the right to block them being able to run down the bike path to get away. I looped around to the right, and within 30 seconds, I saw my partner jink his cruiser hard left, jump out, draw his weapon, and at that point, I jinked my car, jumped out, and about that time I realized I was looking at two subjects with what I believed to be an M16 in their hands. I grabbed the shotgun, came up. Now, fortunately, my partner was bilingual. He started yelling at them in both Spanish and English to put the gun down. I had the Remington 870 12-gauge shotgun with 6 rounds in it. The Remington 870 has approximately a 5-pound trigger pull. I probably had 2.5 pounds of that trigger already depressed, because I had made the conscious decision, I am not getting in a gunfight with an M16 and being the second person shooting. Fortunately, the two subjects paid attention to him. They put the gun down. He went up and handcuffed one of them, came back to me, got my handcuffs, because at the time we didn't carry multiple handcuffs. You only carried one set of handcuffs. What the hell do you need multiple handcuffs for?
Right.
He comes to me, gets my handcuffs, goes up and handcuffs the second subject. The guy that he had been talking to, by the way, while this is all going on, before he went up to handcuff him, I see him out of the corner of my eye coming up behind my partner. And I happen to shoot all long guns left-handed because I'm left eye dominant. So I have the shotgun up with my left hand. I see this guy coming up behind my partner. I drew my handgun across the top of the shotgun at this guy coming towards my partner. At that point's when I saw the badge in his hand. And I'm like, okay, handgun went away, back on the shotgun. So both subjects got handcuffed. I turned around and looked behind me. There's 4 parked police cruisers blocking the park so that nobody's coming in or out. And they did exactly what they should have done. Rather than come running up behind us and scare the hell out of us, they stayed up there in Overwatch. Okay?
Right.
So my partner and the guy who had reported it, who happened to be a Metro Transit police officer, he was riding his bike when he saw these two guys. They both grabbed the two guys and start to take them back up to the park guys. The gun's still laying there. And they left it there because as my partner was coming by, he goes, take care of the gun, knowing I'm a firearms instructor. Cool, not a problem. So I go down, I pick up this M16, and about that time I hear thwop, 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 and I look up, and here comes Park Police's helicopter about 50 foot off of the water, off of the Potomac River, coming straight at me. Flares up over top a set of trees, swings the boom around, and lands about 35 feet from me. He lands. I have the weapon in my hand. I go to hit the magazine release to remove the magazine from the weapon. It won't come out. I'm like, okay, we'll do this the hard way. So I grab the charging handle to open it to see if that will release the pressure to lock it to the rear. It won't move. I rolled it over and I see a little curve right where the ejection port should be with a little finger handle on it. I pull it back and it was a goddamn BB gun.
Yep.
I was so pissed off because I was 2.5 pounds away from killing these two idiots.
Right.
Over a BB gun.
I was so pissed off. I had that BB gun in one hand. I was walking back up towards those cruisers. I did not care that they were handcuffed. Because they damn near made me kill them. I was going to smack one of them dead in the mouth. That's how mad I was. And how
Buford T.
stressed
Justice.
I was. Okay? And a park police sergeant saved my career. Because he saw the look in my face. He saw my hand. He grabbed me by the arm. He said, son, it ain't worth it. Don't do it. And was able to defuse it. But that's what stress can do to you.
Right.
Do I know it was wrong? Hell, did I know it was wrong 2 seconds after he said don't do it? Yeah.
Right.
But at that moment, the only thing going through my head is, I almost killed you assholes And I almost got killed by a goddamn helicopter.
Right.
for a daisy.
Yeah. Oh, I was hot. Okay. But that's what stress can do to you. And that's why the other officers on the scene are so important. Because when you reach that point, there has to be someone there, if you can't pull yourself back, to pull you back and say, enough. Too much. Back off.
Right. So I've heard that story before. I've heard that story many times. So I know the answer to this next question, but I want you to answer it for John and for anyone else who's listening. In your over 30 years of work in law enforcement, including that story, how many times did you have to draw your weapon?
4 times.
4 times. How many times did you have to discharge your weapon?
0.
Right. And that's kind of what I've been saying, which is, and you've been how many years removed from the force
5
at this
now.
point? 5 years now?
Yeah.
So you got to experience what post 9/11 police work was like.
Oh, I was working at Dulles and just happened to look up as a plane took off. It was an American Airlines plane heading west that morning.
Right.
I don't know if it's the plane that hit the Pentagon or not, but I'd worked at the range for years at that point. Planes flying over didn't mean anything to me. I could care less. For some reason, that plane drew my attention.
Right. Okay, so you lived it.
Pre 9/11 and I worked post 9/11. And
we didn't see him for about 2.5 weeks after 9/11. He was stuck in a tiny room looking at tiny CCTV cameras.
Oh no, I was working 16-hour days. I was working at headquarters and or the Joint Operations Center in DC during the day, and I was working teaching firearms to a basic recruit class in the evening, and then on weekends I was back at the jock for 12-hour shifts. And that was for almost 3.5 weeks.
So would you agree with me that how the police were pre 9/11 is way different from the way they are now post 9/11? As far as like tactics and training and stuff like that, would you agree with that, or would you disagree?
In some things, I would say yes. We became different because the possible threats we were facing were different.
Right.
Okay. In other ways, no. In other ways, we probably didn't evolve quickly enough in some things.
Right.
But some of our tactics and stuff like that? Oh yeah, absolutely, they changed. Based upon where I worked, we were what were called Category X airports. The question was not, are you going to get hit? The question is, when are you going to get hit? And nobody could answer that question. So did our tactics evolve because of 9/11? Because, yeah, we got hit. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, our tactic evolved. Were we hyper vigilant because of that? Yes. And you can only be in that state of hyper vigilance for so long before it takes a big toll on the rest of your life.
Right.
And how you do things.
Because that's kind of been one of my big talking points when it comes to the police now is for the last almost 20 years at this point, they have been more and more told that anything can happen at any given time. You need to be high stress, go. And they've been given military grade weapons, given military grade vehicles, given military grade gear, and some places given military training as far as tactics and engagement and whatnot like that. So the cops that were maybe around pre 9/11, where maybe they would be more willing to take a risk to help someone out before they went to the lethal force. Now that the trek to get there got a lot shorter. At least that's because that's the way I look at it. Like, the cops now look like soldiers. That should be fucking terrifying to people. And I don't
agree.
Like,
in a
we
lot
need
of
more
cases,
Andy Griffith. Yeah, I was gonna say we need more Andy Griffiths than we need more Andys from Andy Griffith's show than we do soldiers.
Well, that would be wonderful if we had more people like the people that lived in the town of Mayberry. Where the most dangerous person you had in the town of Mayberry was the guy that threw rocks.
Right.
Okay.
Well, and that's the thing. Every action is an equal and opposite reaction. You have people that are, the cops get more, pumped up. Now the people that have to deal with them on a daily basis, they're more stressed out because they don't know what's going to happen.
I would argue with you that it actually was the other way around. Okay? Now, 9/11 played a certain part in it, absolutely.
Right.
But when I came on the police department, at least with the airport authority, prior to when I was with the provost marshal's office, I carried a military 45 caliber semi-automatic handgun, M1911, right, because that's what the MPs carried. Okay.
Right.
But when I went to the police department, I carried a revolver. Okay.
Right.
Now, the great thing about a revolver is they are severely accurate. With a revolver, I could put 3 rounds touching each other at 25 yards.
Well, maybe 15 years ago you could have done that. I don't know about it anymore, old man.
Yeah,
somebody doesn't get out to the range anymore.
Yeah. Okay. I'll grant you that. Okay. But I couldn't do that with a semi-automatic pistol. And the reason you can't do it with a semi-automatic pistol is because of the way it's designed. It doesn't lock up in the same position all the time. So it just doesn't do that. Okay. However, law enforcement was encountering, I've got a wheel gun with 6 rounds. I've got 2 speed loaders. I got a grand total of 18 rounds to save my butt if stuff goes south.
Right.
But we were coming up against people that had semi-automatic pistols carrying 15 rounds in a magazine and 1 in a chamber. He had almost as much firepower just in the gun as I had in my entire body. So we adapted to what the people we may encounter were using. I get your point about, so we adapted and we brought up what we use. Well, now the people see what we're using, so they move up a step, and you keep making those steps, and eventually it can get really ugly really fast.
Like the police department in Minneapolis driving a tank down the street and shooting people on their porches with rubber bullets just to get back inside, who are literally just standing on their porches with a tank. A tank. Let me say that a third time. A tank rolling down the street.
Carrier, not a tank, but equivalent.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the equivalent without the turret on top.
It's not an M60A1. Okay.
Right.
It's not a Sherman. Okay. It's an armored personnel carrier. But your point is valid. Okay. You don't calm down the populace by driving down the street in an APC. Okay. Right. Matter of fact, I remember when I was a young troop, a guy that I knew for Fairfax County, and had been on for years, worked out of the Mount Vernon district. okay, which is there's a place in the Mount Vernon district called Gum Springs. Gum Springs is predominantly black, and it was actually where most of the slaves that George Washington freed moved to and created their homes.
Right.
After the death of Martin Luther King and the riots that were occurring in D.C., Fairfax County put 4 cops to every car to patrol in areas, Gum Springs being one of them. And they pulled up in front of this gentleman's house, and he was sitting on his porch with a shotgun. They got out and said, "Sir, is there a problem?" And he goes, "Nope, no problem at all." And they're like, "Okay, so why are you out on the porch with your shotgun?" And the man looked at him and said, "I'm on my porch with a shotgun because it took me 30 years to own this house. And nobody, black, white, green, or orange, is coming and burning down my house." At which point, Fairfax County guys were like, "Sir, you have a good night, and if you need anything, you call us." Got back in the cruiser and left. Okay.
Right. I mean, you can't really argue with a man like that.
No.
Absolutely not.
And this is another thing I kind of want to bring up with the whole looting and protesters burning stuff down. As Chris said, we went to a protest today. Our side started no fights. Were we jaw-jacking with the other side? Of course, we were.
We were jaw-jacking. We were shit-talking. They were shit-talking. We were shit-talking. No point in making bones about it. Yeah.
Right. But it did get physical at one point.
Well, two or 3 points.
2 or 3 points. I saw 2. But the main one I'm talking about is there was a girl instigating, but there's no other way to look at it. She was instigating.
Yes.
And someone basically blocked her and said, "No, we're having a peaceful protest. You need to leave. We have not caused any problems. You just need to go." And she pushed that person. And then another man came out from a different crowd and started grabbing people and punching people in the face. Sounds
like an assault to me. Sounds like he needed to go to jail.
I think he did go to jail because I didn't see him afterwards.
He did later, and I know when you and I talked a couple weeks ago, and I told you I might have gone to the ones in Nashville. You told me to keep my head on a swivel, so that's what happened. When we got there, I was looking around, I was seeing who was there. I saw MPD, I saw the sheriff's department. I was looking, I was like, okay, these are obviously the protest people. All right, you got some good old boys hanging out over there, ready to spew their bullshit. Cool. What's this guy doing? This guy's just standing here, and he don't look right. So I looked at John. I was like, hey, keep an eye on this dude. Something ain't right. And sure enough, it's that dude they ended up having to drag off because he started shoving and screaming in people's faces and punching and all kinds of other crap. Old white dude. White dude. Yeah. And what caught me was he was standing there very quietly, not talking to anybody, and then he pulled out his phone. And even within a foot of him, I couldn't hear the conversation he was having. Right. So in my head, I went, hit this motherfucker up to something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, you know what? If you look at all the videos of the looting, now I have absolutely no problem with protesting. Hey, if you think something is wrong, the Constitution says you have every right to assemble and protest peacefully. And the vast majority of protests have been exactly that.
Yeah.
You have, like you guys experienced, idiots that come in and try to agitate and create problems. And
in our case, as well as many others, specifically white supremacist idiots.
Well, yes. I don't care what their ideology is. Okay, they're idiots. I don't care.
They're just double idiots with the white supremacists.
I don't care if they're Black Panthers. You go in and start crap, you're an idiot. Okay, that's not what this is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about, hey, we need to work together to fix the problems. And so let me tell you what the problems are so that we can work together to fix the problems. So I don't care what side of the spectrum you're on. If you go in and try to agitate and create issues, yeah, you deserve to get locked up. Period. Okay?
So what was funny is, and I don't know if you know, it's not actually funny. I don't know if you noticed this or not, John, but it was the members of the sheriff's department, which actually a friend of ours from college is on and was there. It was members of the sheriff's department who were getting involved in breaking up the altercations.
Right.
Meanwhile, Murfreesboro Police Department is standing on the other side of the square with the counter protesters, for lack of a better term, standing over there with them. Now, part of that could have been to be like, if they started running off to grab them and go, no, you don't. Part of that could have been
they didn't do that
that's where
either,
they were told.
because
They didn't really do that either. No.
Yeah. Because we were at
Sheriff's
one
Department
point
was doing the majority of the work. MPD was just kind of standing there with their arms crossed.
Yeah, there was one point where we got surrounded.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you noticed that. I noticed that.
Oh, no, I noticed it in a heartbeat.
Because my danger sense went up, and I started seeing like people run, and I was like, all right, this might get real quick. And I started seeing it, and I saw Sheriff Department moving people out while MPD sat on their asses over in the shade, literally.
Yeah.
And as far as like the looting and stuff goes, there's a really great video. I hope Chris sends it to you that explains the reason why people are looting.
I believe I did send it to him. You're talking about the I can't remember her name now. The extremely angry woman. Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of people justifiably feel that social contract's been broken, so fuck it. I don't have to respect you anymore either. If you're not going to respect me, I don't have to respect you. I personally will not loot because I don't feel like I need to. I understand why people do it. If you get away with it, cool. If you don't get away with it, well, that's just part of it.
That's on you.
That's on you. But a lot of these looters are not protesters or not people that are there for.
They're there specifically to be looters and to be assholes.
Yeah.
Well,
there are people that show up to these things just to loot or just instigate fights.
If you look at least the videos that I have looked at, or the news feeds that I have looked at, where there has been looting and rioting, most of the people that are doing the looting and rioting are not the ones that are complaining that they're being treated unjustly.
Yeah.
Notice that, did you?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Because they know they can get out of it. That's the thing. They know they can just get out.
People of
color
may find that that's not the case anymore.
Well, I hope they do find that out,
okay,
because they're not helping the cause.
Absolutely, I hope they find that. Okay?
Yeah.
I hope that they get their butts hammered, because that's what they need. Okay? Matter of fact, I think it's a great thing in a lot of cases that people protest to try and say, here is something that is wrong with our system. Let's talk about a way to fix that problem. Okay? The people who want to go to burn down other people's crap and the people who want to go bust things up, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I see your point. We'll agree to disagree on that. I do agree that if you go there to just be destructive, you're not helping. And you do deserve whatever the fuck you get. But I also think that the people that are complaining about Macy's or Target being burnt, but the name of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor haven't fucking escaped your mouth, you need to shut the fuck up and never talk again, because you're not getting the point. Fucking the Breonna Taylor one is the one that, like, don't get me wrong, George Floyd pisses me off. Breonna Taylor infuriates me.
That was actually next on my list of points to bring up, was the Breonna Taylor case.
Because that was and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, that was a no-knock entry, right?
That was a no-knock warrant. Yes. Are you up to speed on the case, Dad? And due to internet issues, that's about the time that we lost my dad. We did get him back, though, and we continued the conversation. And if you'd like to hear the rest of that conversation, look out, because it's coming in episode 28. Thank you guys so much for listening to this first part. We hope you stick around for the second part. This has been a really great conversation so far. I hope you stick to the end of it. There's some more stuff we get into, and we do end this topic on a lighter note with a really good, funny story from my dad's cop days. So once again, thank you guys so much for listening, and we will see you next time on the Anarchy Arena Podcast.